What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie D'Astoli Show. I am your host, Frankie D'Astoli. As always, excited to have you guys here. I got a great episode in store for you. But if you aren't already doing so, follow me on Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. I am answering any and all DMs that come my way. I think I have a 100% track record. Maybe I don't want to sell myself too much. Maybe a 98% track record of answering everybody within an hour. I usually am responding within an hour. If I'm not responding to your DM within an hour, it's probably one of these few options. I'm either recording an episode of the Frankie D'Astoli Show, I am touring some properties or looking at any projects that we have going on, I'm working with somebody in the dojo, whether it's a mentorship program or through our wholesale coursing. I am either in prayer or I am sleeping. It's one of those five, right? So if you don't hear from me back in about an hour, you could assume it's one of those situations. But anybody that follows me, if you guys are shooting me DMs, I'm answering them, and I'm very appreciative of everybody that has reached out. I've gotten some great questions. I've had some great conversations with some people just about real estate, Catholicism, life in general. So it's been awesome. I'm very appreciative of all that. I'm very appreciative of all my listeners, too. We've been recording the Frankie D'Astoli Show for just over a month now. This episode is going to be episode 14, and there's been some amazing feedback. There's been some, great people that have shown a lot of support and appreciation, and I'm sincerely I'm really blessed. At the end of the day, I'm really blessed. I'm blessed that I get to get in front of this mic to talk about my journey that God has so blessed me with, and to inspire others. It really continues to keep the flame ignited in me and to continue to keep me going. So if this is your first time listening to the Frankie D'Astoli Show, welcome. I hope that you pull a lot of value from this episode, and that you pull a lot of value from a lot of episodes and whatever else that you end up listening to. And if you are a consistent listener, you're up 5 a.m. on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, ready to start playing that episode, you are a sincere appreciation of mine. I'm very, very thankful to have you guys as listeners. So thanks so much. If you're here for the real estate content, I came out with 2 episodes this week that I think you're going to find very, very valuable. The first one is how to acquire your next real estate deal without breaking the bank. And the second one was how to pick and analyze your real estate market. And I did something a little bit different with these 2 episodes. I actually did a PowerPoint presentation. I did a screen share. So if you are more of a visual learner, you could find those screen shares on YouTube video, or you could also find them on Dastoli'sDojoREI.com. So if you want to take notes and you want to really get granular with it, by all means go there. The audio versions are still on any of your podcasting platforms for the Frankie D'Astoli Show. But I will say this, I do not recommend and I do not approve of driving and note-taking. So if you want to really get a lot out of those episodes, feel free to watch the videos. And the whole podcast is on YouTube, whereas just the clips of the presentation is on Dastoli'sDojoREI.com. So if you're there just for the real estate and not listening to me talking, then you can find those there. And what I will say, whether you're watching on YouTube video or you're listening on your podcasting platform, please, if you guys wouldn't mind, rate the show, review the show, subscribe, follow. I really appreciate it. I love hearing everyone's feedback. I love hearing everybody's opinions and show ideas. Give me some show ideas of some things that you guys want to hear, and let me know what you think about the content. But I have a really great show with you guys, and it kind of was inspired from a conversation that I had with a good buddy of mine. A buddy of mine, his name's Justin. He reached out to me and he wanted to grab coffee the other day. So we ended up getting coffee, and Justin's a great dude. He's a young guy. He's 23 years old. He's a business owner. He's doing some really awesome stuff, but he's actually in a relationship, and that relationship is starting to go a little bit to the next level. He's got a few, different things on his mind now. It's not so much of just hey, let's go on dates and let's enjoy each other's company. It's more so hey, are we going to get married? Are we going to have kids? This is on his mind. It's on his girl's mind. And there's a lot that's kind of, coming about that. And we were out getting coffee. I very much was expecting the conversation to kind of go along the lines of hey, what are you investing in real estate? What are some opinions on this stuff? What do you think I could possibly get into? Him and I have had some conversations about house hacking in the past. So that's where I thought the conversation was going to go. And then he kind of throws this curveball at me, and he says, hey, just out of curiosity, do you regret having kids so young? Because everybody that I'm talking with is saying that I should wait before I have kids. And, I think we get a lot of opinions from a lot of people, and we get a lot of kind of these worldly views. And when people give you guys opinions like this, if they're saying oh, wait to have kids, or, you gotta, do this before you get married, or whatever the case might be, right? Or don't invest in real estate. they're usually coming from a good place. It's coming from people's experiences and why they're expressing that. And I'm not here saying don't listen to what anybody says, but at the same time, I think some people have had some experiences that have led to some negative results. And because of that, they're portraying some views out there that are more worldly views. And I am going to explain in this episode why I think you should not necessarily take certain opinions. We're going to talk through a handful of these worldly views and why I disagree with them. But I'm going to kind of start with the story from what Justin's question was to me. And it was, do I regret having kids so early? And just to give you guys a heads up, I'm 27 years old. My wife and I, we had our first baby girl, Bernadette, when I was 26 years old. So in today's world, that's like pretty early, right? People were like, that's not as common as it once was. Back in the day, that was like late, right? People were like pretty much like, getting married early 20s, if not even like late teens way back, right? And stuff like that. And it was very much like meet a girl, fall in love, or meet a boy, fall in love, get married, have kids. That was the MO, and things have changed significantly. So in my world now, being a 26-year-old dad, I was the first dad out of all of my friends. I was the first one to get married. There were a lot of firsts for me. And I think ultimately my wife was just a little bit more mature and I kind of picked up on that faster. But just to kind of get into that. So I had my first daughter at 26. And I've always been a man of faith for the most part, right? It's intensified as I've been married now and even when I was dating Christina. But before we got married, it was about 2 days before we got married, I actually said a prayer, and I remember this prayer vividly. And it was a prayer that came from a good place, but I was pretty much saying, Father, I am so appreciative of this woman that you have brought into my life. It's been the absolute greatest gift that you have ever given me. But I really would like 1 year of just her and I. Just 1 year. We get married. We just have a year of where we could travel. Give me a year of where I can, get my career in order a little bit more. And then, from there, then we could have kids. I feel like at that point, I'll be ready to start really settling down and having kids with her. But I would just love a year where we just enjoy each other's company and I get a few more of my ducks in a row. That was my prayer. And again, it came from a good place, right? So I say this prayer about 2 days before our wedding. We get married on November 18th of 2022. We end up getting married. We move into our first house hack. And this was one of those things too. Her and I did not live together before we got married. She comes from a very strict Catholic family, which I respect and love. And even though I was, 22 when we first started dating at a University of Delaware, I came from this whole frat star background. It was hard for me at first to kind of really wrap my head around, but now that we've gone through it, I really see the benefit and the beauty of it. So we end up getting married. We move into our first, home together, which is our house hack duplex that we originally had. And we honeymoon in Hawaii, and we come back. And on December 15th of 2022, Christina takes a pregnancy test, and it comes back that she's pregnant. And we're both just like in shock, right? We're just like, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe it happened this fast, and all of these things are going on. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, well, there goes like my 1 year plan, right? Of just kind of being with me and her. And that's all that to say, it wasn't a negative feeling, right? It was an exciting feeling. And it was right around Christmas time. So I'm buying Christina all these mommy gifts, right? I get her the mama sweatshirt, the mugs, the Honest baby belly rub, moisturizer, whatever it is. We start talking about gender. We start, planning out how we're going to transform my office into a nursery, all these positive things. And 3 days later, December 18th, exactly 1 month after we were married, a few things happened, not to get into too detailed and give you guys TMI in that sense. But we end up having to go to the hospital, and we realized that we have Christina had a miscarriage. And, the doctors say it passed. That's how they phrased it. It passed, meaning pretty much like it's gone through. It's no longer the baby's no longer in Christina. And it was a very hard night. We end up going back home, and, we're both crying. We're both just kind of reflecting on what we thought if it was going to be a boy or a girl. And it's just sorrowful. It's hard, right? And for anybody that's had a miscarriage, it's very, very challenging. There's a lot of these emotions of I'm going to be a parent. It's such an amazing feeling. There's all this joy. There might be some anxiety too. But at the same time, it's hard. It's a hard thing to swallow. So all of that happens, and a couple months go by, and thankfully, we end up recovering internally and all of that stuff. And thanks be to God, we end up conceiving again. And now this was in March of 2023 at this point. So I'm at this point reflecting, and I'll even backtrack a little bit. When we had the miscarriage, I start reflecting on the prayer that I was saying. And the prayer was to give me a year, right? To give me a year with Christina, to not like give us a kid just yet. And now that we had lost that kid, it was very, very hard for me to swallow. It made me kind of realize like I prayed for this, right? I prayed for this time without a child. And now I've had this small little feeling of being a dad, and now it's gone. And it was a very hard thing for me to like really come to terms with and to realize. And these things happen. I'm not taking away from that, but it was just one of those things where like I realized I said a prayer that I didn't really understand and I didn't really mean. And I was trying to inflict my own will over God's will. So, as I said, by God's grace, we end up conceiving a couple months later, and truly in just absolute fashion of God giving gifts to us. Our daughter Bernadette is born on our 1 year wedding anniversary, November 18th, 2023, which marks a full year of me and Christina not necessarily having a kid earthside. And then on that 1 year mark, having Bernadette, our daughter, as a gift given to us by God. And it was just one of those moments where I just realized, like, listen, I pray for things for sure, as we all do, right? But as Jesus says in the garden before his passion, he says, you know, not my will be done, but yours. And that is a reminder that we always need to be putting God at the forefront of what we do and giving, you know, everything over to him. So to answer Justin's question, no, I absolutely do not regret having kids early at least, right? And I think what we, you know, kind of wrap our head around is we prioritize things such as our career and such as our own self and our well-being and what we need to experience, where what we realize when we're doing that is we're actually putting aside the things that bring true joy, which are things such as marriage, having kids, you know, going through hardships together as a family and growing that family, growing that what they call the domestic church, which is your own home. So I have, you know, my daughter now who's 14 months at this point, and I have a son on the way too, who's due in the beginning of March. So no, I absolutely do not regret having kids. I tell my wife all the time, I joke around, I say, we're going for 8 under 8, right? And she laughs at me. But at the end of the day, like the way that I envision this and the way that I think us Catholics and Christians need to really understand this is like, this is our job. This is what we're called to do. We're called to marriage if we're not called to some sort of, you know, priesthood or something along those lines. And we are called to have children and start a family. So I love the call that I have been called to. I love the role that I'm in. I'm going to continue as long as it's by God's grace to have kids. And for me as a business owner, it's also extremely motivating. Like you want to talk about motivation, talk about the fact that like if I don't get things done, like my daughter's not having, you know, diapers and things to eat, like that's going to get you motivated. So, and again, it's all great. It's all positive things. And that's kind of how I was portraying it to Justin. And I think that, you know, he got a lot of value out of that. And like I said, for anybody that has this opinion of like, you need to wait to have kids, you need to get your career in order and all that stuff. I'm not saying that, you know, you cannot listen to them. It's just, I think you need to really search for like where true joy comes from. And when you realize that it comes from family, it comes from, you know, passing things on and having, you know, kids and a good marriage, then you're going to realign your values and kind of, you know, prioritize your life based off of that. So today's episode, I'm really going to dive into some of the world's rules, right? Some of these kind of worldly views of what people are saying. And I'm going to give you guys my opinion on what I think of that. Now, keep in mind, my opinion comes rooted in Catholic faith and business ownership, right? Entrepreneurship. So some of these things, like I said, you guys might not all disagree with. And truthfully, guys, some of them might get a little bit spicy, right? They might even be a little controversial. And my intent is not to like say, if you are not doing it this way, you are totally in the wrong. Again, I'm giving my opinion on this stuff. And feel free, like I said, everybody has my Instagram, Frankie D'Astoli _REI. Feel free to DM me if you think that anything I'm saying is out of context and you want to give me some clarity on how you feel and how you view things. But I'm going to go into the first one, right? So the first one is you need to put off finding a significant other in order to establish your career. When you say that, right? When you say I don't want to, you know, get into any types of relationship, or I don't want to get married just yet because I want to make sure my career is in order. What you're saying is you're putting a hierarchy importance on your career, right? Which, like we just talked about, is not actually the thing that brings true joy. A career is good. It's important. You know, like we talk a lot about good work ethic and all of that stuff. That's a positive, but it's not, it shouldn't be in the hierarchy of like forming a marriage, forming a family, and, you know, finding that internal joy. And we see this literally in the book of Genesis from God, right? He literally says it is not good for man to be alone, as he pulls the rib out of Adam close to his heart and creates Eve out of it, right? He literally gives Eve to Adam. And he doesn't say, hey, Adam, before I create Eve for you, you need to do this 10-point task and show me that you could, demonstrate leadership and you need to become the CEO of the garden. Like, that is not what God says, right? He sees that it is not good for man to be alone, and he creates Eve. And by doing that, what he's actually doing is he's creating someone to support Adam, someone to work together with in unity. And that is what all of us need to realize. When you are a man and you are going to strive for your career, you shouldn't put aside finding a spouse. You should go out and search for a supportive spouse, because a supportive spouse will help you advance in your career. And I've seen this personally. I've seen this right now. When Christina and I started dating, I was in medical device sales. When we got engaged, I jumped into real estate. I knew absolutely nothing about real estate. I didn't say, hey, honey, I know we just got engaged, but you know what? We're going to need to wait like 2 to 3 years before we get married because I need to get a real estate portfolio off the ground and I need to know what I'm doing. No, we got married. And I, at that point, had one house hack. I was learning in my, wholesaling career. I was climbing a corporate ladder. And through her support, I got better. I got, more advanced in my career. I, ended up leaving my job and jumping into real estate, investing full time, where now I have a portfolio. And I promise you guys, if it wasn't for having Christina as a supportive wife, I would not be where I am today. And I say that in truth. And it's an example of what God has given us to have. We are called for unity with one another. We lift each other up. We support each other as husband and wife. So I think if you're saying this and you're saying, I feel like I need to be putting off finding a significant other or getting married in order to establish my career, you have it in the wrong order, guys. In my opinion, you should find your supportive spouse as early as possible, and you should unify yourself with them. And I promise you that's going to help you grow in your career, but ultimately you're going to find the true joy from that. The second one, you need to go to college and get a good job. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy for this one, in my opinion. College can be a really, really positive thing. I went to college. I went to University of Delaware. I had a really, really great experience there. And why I think college could be really great and why I think the baseline of college should be is to establish a little bit of independence, right? You're coming from living in a home with your parents, and your parents at this point hopefully are doing everything that they should do, which is provide a good home for you, give you guidance, provide not just a good home, but literally and physically and mentally provide for you. And when you go to college, you have an opportunity to learn how to provide for yourself, how to get some independence. And this doesn't mean like go off and totally like abandon your family and abandon God and say, I am on my own. It's more so like learning how to fend for yourself, learning how to do basic living needs that you need to do when you start a family and you become a member of society. So college could be really good. It could bring great independence. You could also learn a lot if it's in a college that's actually teaching things that are educational, where unfortunately we live in a world now where it seems like most colleges you go to have some sort of agenda that they're trying to push. But on the second half of this, where you need to go to college and get a good job is also really good, right? And again, I'm someone who talks about leaving corporate America, right? Getting into real estate investing full time, getting into entrepreneurship, getting into being a business owner. But I am able to say this because I had a job. And that job taught me humility. It taught me strong work ethic. It taught me how to be a follower before becoming a leader. And when you go to college and you get that independence and you go out and you get a good job and you see how kind of like the world works, there's a lot of positive to that. But the dichotomy is this could go really, really negatively. College, as great as it can be, could also be what I call the devil's playground, right? And from someone who was a frat star who literally like would party 3 to 4 days a week and, do like not great things, I absolutely was in the devil's playground in a lot of scenarios, right? I remember my boys and I, we had a house our sophomore year. It hands down had to be the biggest party house on the campus of University of Delaware. We must have thrown at least 80 parties that year in that house. And we got a fat bill for like 25 grand afterwards because the house was in such disarray. We had no way to like actually get it back to what it was. But having said all of that, if you go to college, you are going to be tempted. And when you are faced with temptation, there's actually a lot of positives that could come from that. You could actually develop a lot of virtue through that. And this is kind of on the whole path to becoming a saint is what, the Catholic, church talks about. But you could also fall into temptation. And once you fall into temptation, there could be a lot of negative things that come from that. And unfortunately, with people that I know from college, I've seen it, and it's led to some really, really bad things. So although what comes with college is independence and a lot of potential growth, there could be a lot of despair and a lot of disappointment on the back end. And sometimes even when you come out of college and you go and you find a job, you end up landing into comfortability. and comfortability of this, stable job where you're just receiving this paycheck, it starts to, in a sense, could even form kind of like some idolatry where you're just dependent on a paycheck, and that could be a problem, right? So there's a dichotomy to that. My opinion is if you are going to go to college, go to a college that teaches good things, that promote you, that grow your moral and grow your financial IQ, and your career, especially if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, like that's part of the requirements for sure. And make sure you learn some independence there, but make sure also you do not fall into temptation and go down dark paths. And you need a really good support system, and you need to mentally, physically, and emotionally prepare yourself for going into that. All right, the next one. You need to be financially secure before you have kids. I flat out disagree with this, guys. I flat out disagree. And from a Catholic standpoint, we rely on God. That is what we have to be called to do. We need to rely on God in all circumstances, financially, emotionally, whatever it is, right? And in all circumstances, we need to rely on God. And we see this when we look at the book of Exodus, right? Where God brought his people out of Egypt into the desert to go wander to the promised land. And we see that it says every single day he provided for them manna, right? Which is bread. He would literally provide for them bread. Bread would fall down and it would be in their hands and they would be provided for. They would have that. And it was a way of God teaching and training really these people that came from a pagan society in Egypt on how to rely on him, and not to rely on idols and, sun gods and golden calves and all of that other stuff, but to rely solely on God, knowing that he provides. So if you are in this position where you're either married or you're thinking about getting married, but you're like, I need to make sure I'm financially stable before I have kids, I want you to really wipe that away, because especially in today's world where there's never really enough, the definition of financially stable is like, kind of fugazi. It's like mystical. Like it's never really going to be extremely comfortable and for you to have. So wipe away that idea. And I'm telling you, when you start having kids, you will become motivated enough to make sure that you achieve financially. But even more than that, you're putting yourself in God's hands. And when you put yourself in God's hands, you're at peace and all things work out. Number 4, you need to travel and see the world, right? This is a little bit of an interesting one. I think, if you graduate college and you say like, hey, I want to travel to some really awesome basilicas, right? I want to like really put myself in some I want to go to Rome maybe to like really, understand more about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Situations like that can be beneficial. However, I think some of those situations are best when you do it with a supportive spouse who you love and you're trying to really form that unity together. But I think when we go to kind of this travel and see the world, what we're really saying is that when you do that, when you come back from traveling, you're coming back to not attractive things. You're coming back to a life of long work and a life of marriage and kids where you no longer have responsibility, or I shouldn't say responsibility, you no longer have dictatorship over your own life, right? You now are serving a family and serving kids, and you can't do these fun things. And when you say go travel the world and then, before you start settling down, you're just, again, you're putting a hierarchy on yourself, on that ego aspect. And especially for, people that are like, I'm going to go backpack Europe for a year to find myself. Like, what are you really looking for? Everything that you need, guys, is within yourself. If you are Catholic and you were baptized, even to take it for that level, right? Like you have the Holy Spirit dwelling in you. You just need to look within yourself if you really need to go out and like find yourself, right? And again, I'm not taking away from like enjoying a nice trip, right? Because you work hard and all of that stuff. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying don't put a hierarchy on these worldly views over the things that are actually everlasting and bring joy. All right, the next one. You shouldn't take risks. I do agree with this, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit. You shouldn't take uncalculated risks, right? An uncalculated risk is where you haven't done any planning and preparation, right? So like if I wake up tomorrow and I say, you know what, I'm going to no longer be a real estate investor. I'm going to just sell my portfolio and I'm going to go pursue a career in acting. That is an uncalculated risk on my behalf. I am doing it out of potentially selfish reasons. I'm doing it out of some pain that has forced me into this, and I'm not necessarily having it planned out. And I'm also just disregarding the responsibilities that I currently have. I don't agree with taking uncalculated risks, but I do agree with taking risks in general that are calculated. And I come from a place where I have taken significant risks, especially over the past, couple years. But when you take risks, my formula for this is you first and foremost need to pray on it. take time, right? Whether it's a few hours, sometimes a few hours is enough just to decide if you're going to take a risk, a day, a couple weeks, a couple months. I remember when I was planning to jump out of my W-2 and jump into real estate investing full time as a full blown, portfolio builder. I prayed on this for months, right? Whereas other times, certain other things that I, was deciding on doing or not, sometimes it might just be a quick prayer of, Lord, give me some direction here, right? So you need to pray, and then you need to really study and prepare yourself as much as possible for the task that you're going to be going into, right? So again, think career change, think, other certain dynamics in those regards. Make sure that you are well prepared before you step into that new kind of realm of what you're going to be doing. And if you do not take risks, guys, you are selling yourself short. By taking risks, you do a couple of things. One, you put yourself in a potential opportunity to be somewhere significantly better than where you currently are. But two, you also learn so much about yourself. You really, really learn so much about yourself when you take risks. When you face that hardship, you grow in virtue, and that's really important. This last one, guys, and this is probably the most controversial one that I'm going to talk about. Both husband and wife need to work. This is one that, some people listening might not necessarily want to hear, but I am really in the firm belief that although men and women have equal dignity, we were not created for the same things. This is how I believe, and this is what has worked best for me. So when we think about women, right, and for any women listening out there, like, you guys have something that is the most beautiful thing in this entire world. You have the ability to bring forth life, right? And this is something that guys do not have, right? We don't have this. No matter how many pills or surgeries they might say you could do and what you could take, you are not born with the ability to bring forth life. So as a woman, you have this unbelievable gift that is a gift truly from God that our entire civilization depends on. And any single person in this entire world has a mom, period. End of story. They were born from a mother, right? This is something that us guys, we literally cannot do. So this is what society says, and this is what really gets me going, right? They say, all right, women, you could have kids, but you should really just make sure your career is established first. And then after you have that kid and you're carrying it for 9 months and you're dedicating your entire life to growing this child, once the kid's born, give it to somebody else to watch it, so that way you could return back to the workforce and you could work 9, 10, 11 hours and then come home and see the kid a little bit maybe before bedtime and then go back and do it the next day. This is so wrong. It is so wrong. And in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons why we have such problems with the family and we see so much brokenness. Men and women were created for two distinct roles. Women have this ability to nurture, to care, to support. And you see it even from the moment a child is born. When a baby is born in the hospital, they don't run to dad, right? They don't run to Papa and say, oh, like, hold me in your arms. No, they want mama. They smell their mother. They understand their touch. They need to be close to them. And it's not because dad has a scruffy beard. Like, that's not why. The baby's not saying, your beard's a little too scruffy, dad. I don't want to lay on you. It is the fact that they are attracted to their mom. So when you have this child and the child's attracted to the mom, and then a few weeks or months later after maternity leave is over and you go back, it's in a sense of abandonment. And most women and most families as a whole, I'm not blaming women in this sense, I'm not blaming men, that's not what I'm saying at all. Most families as a whole, unfortunately, it feels like they don't have a choice. They don't have a choice for the mom to be home, right? Because they need to support the family. And what we realize is happening here is, although that's, you guys might, we all might have the right intention on saying like, hey, we need to go out, we need to support the family. That's why we're both working and we need a nanny to watch the kid, or we need to give it to one of the in-laws or the grandparents, whatever the case might be. The actual realities of the situation is it's causing a negative effect, because you're putting your child in somebody else's hands to be raised, and there's a sense of abandonment. And it might not always be so, like so hardcore. Like the child might not feel like mommy's abandoning me or daddy's abandoning me. That's not necessarily what it might be. But there's just some brokenness that's forming in there, right? So as men and women, I strongly believe that the best dynamic is, if you're a man, you have one job. Your job is to provide and serve for your family. If you are a woman, you have one job. It's to nurture, it's to love, it's to form a fortified home in faith, and something that when, your children are brought up, they're brought up in good faith, they're brought up in good standing, because you as the mom were there to give them that support and to give them that nurturing. And they see dad out there grinding, making it happen, and providing for his wife and for his children, all while serving God. And again, I know that one's probably more of the controversial one. If you are a woman listening and you have a great career, I'm not trying to like take away anything. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to say. I just see it internally. I see it within my own family. And again, I'm giving you opinions based off my Catholic background, based off my business ownership. My wife is, home with my daughter every day. She's home with my son, and I'm very, very blessed to have that. And it's really, really amazing as a husband to come home and to see it. And I'm just extremely appreciative of it. And I think that it's the most beautiful thing. And that's why I promote it, because I really feel like that is a source of happiness. And even if you look at statistics, you see divorce rate through the roof. You see all these, kids they feel lost. They don't have a sense of direction. It's because they're in disrupted families. There's no order. And if we could bring back that order, I really feel like it's going to bring back just a great sense of family pride within the country, within the world, and just so much betterness as it all goes on. So I got off on a little bit on a tangent there, but those are my kind of 6 worldly views that I, disagree with for the most part. Again, you don't have to agree with everything that I say here. That's absolutely not it. I'm just giving you guys my opinions based off of my experiences. And I hope that you find some value out of this. We're going to be kicking off next week with some great real estate talks as well. But I love kind of bringing in some life stories and some Catholicism for you guys too. So if you are enjoying that, and if you agree with any of this, please like, subscribe, follow. And if you disagree, please feel free to DM me on Instagram, and we could talk some of these things out, and I'll give you my experiences, and I would love to hear yours as well. So thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day, and I will be talking to you soon. Peace out.